You ever build something with your own hands? Something that took weeks of your time and every bit of energy you had after long work days, and feel genuinely proud of it for the first time in a long time? That was me last spring. I had just finished building my daughter a treehouse. 3 weekends of work, sore hands, sawdust in my hair, and it was perfect. She had named every part of it. She had a little shelf up there for her bug jars. She slept better at night just knowing it was in the backyard. 11 days later, the HOA sent me a letter telling me to tear it down. 2 months after that, I watched a crew they hired rip it apart while my 7-year-old stood at the back window and watched. And that was the moment I decided I was going to take down every single person responsible. Legally, let me take you back to the beginning. I moved my family to Cedarwood Estates about 2 years before any of this happened. I am an electrician. I work long hours and I save carefully. And this neighborhood was the finish line I had been running toward for years. Good schools, clean streets, neighbors who actually wave at you in the morning. My wife Dana fell in love with it the first time we drove through. There was an HOA, and we knew that going in. We sat down together and read every page of the community rules before we signed anything. Keep your lawn maintained, stay within approved paint colors, no commercial trucks in the driveway. It was all completely reasonable. Nothing that gave us any pause at all. So we moved in, and for a while, everything was exactly what we hoped it would be. My daughter Lily is the kind of kid that makes you feel like the world is still a good place. She collects bugs and gives them names. She asks questions that stop adults mid-sentence. And from the very first week in that house, she had one request. She wanted a tree house in the big oak tree in the back corner of our yard. So that spring, I built her one. 3 full weekends. I researched the plans. I bought good lumber. And before I even started, I checked the HOA rules 3 separate times to make sure backyard structures were allowed. There was nothing in the rules that said they were not. The treehouse would be in the back corner of the yard, not visible from the street, not visible from any common area. I was completely in the clear. Every Saturday morning while I was building it, Lily would come outside with my coffee in this little plastic cup that had a cartoon dinosaur on it. She handed me tools like she was assisting in surgery, completely serious about the whole operation. By the time we hammered in the last nail, she had already named everything. The top platform was the crow's nest. The rope ladder was the dragon bridge. There was a little wooden shelf where she kept all her bug jars lined up in a row. It was the best thing I had ever built in my life, and I mean that. Then, 11 days later, I opened my mailbox, and there was a letter from the HOA violation. Section 7, Article 4, unapproved structure visible from adjacent properties. 30 days to remove it, or $50 a day in fines. I read it twice, standing right there at the mailbox, and I was genuinely confused. Because I had read Section 7 multiple times, the treehouse was in the back corner of my yard. You could not see it from the street. The only neighbors who had any view of it at all were the Garcias right next door, a retired couple who had walked over the week I finished and told me how great it looked. So I wrote back. I kept it polite. I referenced the exact wording of the rules. I attached photos showing the treehouse was not visible from any common area. I asked them to explain specifically how the violation had been determined. What I got back was not an explanation. It was another fine notice. This one backdated, like they had decided I was already in violation before I had even responded to the first letter. I called the office. I sat on hold for 40 minutes. When someone finally answered, they told me the board's decision was final, and there was no appeal process. I sat with that for a day. Then I started digging. I went back through the full rule book, word by word. I started knocking on neighbors' doors, just asking questions. And what I heard back stopped me cold. The HOA board had 3 members. The president, a man named Gerald Pruitt, had been sitting in that seat for 9 straight years. The community rules had a 2-term limit. Gerald had simply ignored it, and not a single person had ever challenged him on it. The other 2 board members had never been elected at all. Gerald had appointed them himself during a meeting that most residents never even knew had taken place. I talked to 6 different neighbors on my street. Not one of them had received any notice of a board meeting in over a year. And then I looked at the money. I filed a public records request with the county and started going through the numbers. The pattern was right there in black and white. Newer homeowners were getting fined constantly. Anyone who had ever questioned a board decision suddenly found violations stacking up against them. Long-term residents who kept their heads down and stayed quiet paid almost nothing. And in at least 2 cases, money from collected fines funds had been moved into a discretionary fund that only the board could access with zero documentation of where it went. Nobody had ever looked into it because nobody thought they had the right to. Then, one morning, I walked out my back door and there was a crew in my yard. No warning, no court order, no phone call, nothing. Just 4 guys with tools methodically taking apart my daughter's treehouse while Lily stood at the back window watching them and not saying a word. Gerald Pruitt had hired them personally. I did not yell. I did not go outside and make a scene. I went inside, sat down at the kitchen table, and called an HOA attorney. When I finished laying everything out, the attorney got quiet for a second and then said, "This is not a treehouse dispute anymore. What I had documented was election fraud inside a non-profit governing body. It was financial mismanagement. It was destruction of private property carried out without any legal authority whatsoever. And the pattern of who was being fined and who was not potentially crossed into Fair Housing Act violations. They filed a formal complaint with the State Regulatory Division that same week. Then I sat down and wrote a letter to every homeowner in Cedarwood Estates, all 214 of them, certified mail. I included the public records. I listed the board members by name. I showed which meetings had never been properly held. I laid out the financial numbers in plain, simple language. I did not ask anyone to be angry. I just showed them what had been happening in their own neighborhood. Within 2 weeks, 140 homeowners had signed a formal petition demanding a special election and a full independent financial audit. Gerald Pruitt resigned on a Friday afternoon. No statement, no explanation. He just sent in a one-line email and was gone. Both appointed board members were gone within the week. My attorney messaged me when it was official. 3 words: they are out. I walked down the hall and knocked on Lily's doctor and told her we were going to build a new treehouse, a better one. The independent audit found over $40,000 in misused funds across 3 years. Gerald and one of the other board members got referred to the district attorney. A new 6-person board was elected by secret ballot at a properly held meeting with the highest homeowner turnout the community had ever seen. I ran for one of those seats. I won. The first thing the new board did was rewrite the rules on backyard structures in language so clear that nobody could ever twist it again. The second thing we did was send written apologies and refund checks to every homeowner who had been wrongly fined. That fall, I rebuilt the treehouse. Lily helped the same way she always did. Coffee in the dinosaur cup. Tools handed over with great seriousness. The Garcias came out and watched from their back porch, and Mrs. Garcia brought lemonade out for everyone. The new treehouse was bigger than the old one, sturdier, better in every single way. When Lily climbed up to the crow's nest that afternoon and looked back down at me from up there, I felt something in my chest finally just let go. Something that had been tight for almost a year. I am not going to pretend it was all worth it because of some big lesson I learned. Honestly, it was exhausting and stressful, and there were nights I wondered if I should have just torn the thing down and moved on with my life. But I did not. And Gerald Pruitt is gone, and my daughter has her treehouse back, and that is enough for me. If you live in an HOA neighborhood, go pull out your rule book tonight. Not because you are looking for a fight, just because you should know what is in there. Somebody on your board already does.